Good morning. Today is December 16th, 2024. And I wanted to talk today about just the idea of rentals and helping renters. So I'm going to talk about rental agreements on the surface level, what it means to have our tenant agency relationships, and how we can help our renters. So just like buyers, we need to remember that when we help a renter, we are representing them as their agent. We are going to be held to the standards of all the agency duties as we would if we had a buyer client. So the first thing we need to do is deliver and explain what the agency law says, as well as our duties to them in representation. Remember that this is not only to help protect our client, but also to meet our DOL requirements of doing so. We also need to discuss with our client what it means and how we get paid, just as we would with a buyer. So the first thing you're going to reach for is going to be your real estate brokerage in Washington pamphlet. Now remember, this needs to be given to our clients and a provable form of delivery. So that just means we need to prove that they've actually received it. The best solution to do so is to just get them to initial. And if we can't, we just need another provable form of delivery. Then we're going to pull out our tenant brokerage service agreement. So just as helping a buyer, we also need to have a tenant service agreement if we're going to be helping somebody with rentals. Now, this means providing any services regarding rentals at all. If we're going to be looking at them, if we're going to be giving them any sort of consultation about a rental, we do need to have this in place. And of course, it must be signed with that tenant before providing tenant services and definitely before entering any sort of home. So just as our buyer broker agreement, we're going to fill out our tenant agreement the same way. The tenant firm is going to be our own firm, and the tenant is going to be the client we represent. We also have the ability to change the area that we're going to be working in and at what capacity. It's going to have an expiration date similar to our buyer broker agreement. And in agency relationship, it's going to appoint you, the broker, as the representation for that client. Now, when we discuss things with this client, we can have an either exclusive agency relationship or a non-exclusive. And that tenant does have the right to consent or not to consent to a limited dual agent capacity. We do need to have the conversation of compensation, and it has to be an actual number. We can't just leave it blank or up to a listing to provide this number to us. Now, it can either be a percentage of something that is specified, a dollar amount, or if there's some other sort of structure of the payment, that would be written in the other category. It does have the opportunity for us to discuss with our tenant the limited dual capacity, or if that tenant finds something that is not currently listed with the Northwest MLS offering any compensation at all. Now, just as we do with sellers, lessors are not required to list any compensation specifically. So any compensation that is here is going to be the responsibility of the buyer unless offered by the lessor. With our compensation terms, it just defines what those actually mean. Are we going to have an exclusive agency relationship, a non-exclusive agency relationship? And those are things you need to discuss with your client. There has the tenant agency relationship or agreement has a tail provision, which is paragraph 7C. And right now the default is 260 days. Just as the rest of our buyer agreements, the tenant agreement does have boilerplate language for paragraphs 8, 9, 10, and 11. And it has a pretty substantial space in number 12 for us to write anything that maybe didn't get touched on in the previous paragraphs. Make sure when we sign this that our tenant is the client we represent. The tenant broker is you. So fill out as best as possible the information that's down below and try to fill it out completely. Now, if we need to make an amendment to our tenant service agreement, we would reach for Form 41TA. 41TA gives us the opportunity to update any of the terms that we have already decided on 41T. We can extend the term, change the agency relationship, add a co-broker, change limited dual capacity, and we can change the compensation that we've agreed to. Writing up a residential lease. This is going to be Form 68. Form 68 is the renter version of the purchase and sale agreement. If you're not familiar with the rental agreement, I would take some time to familiarize yourself with this form by reading it very thoroughly or reaching out to somebody in property management with TMG Property Management. So the date that is agreed and created is going to be the date that this is written. The lessor is what we would consider the landlord, and the tenant is going to be the person renting. We're going to make note of the address and the community, and the county. And the term of the agreement is going to be a minimum of 6 months using this form. If there's any tenant agreement that lasts over 12 months, a legal description must be attached. Remember that once this is filled out, it will need to go get notarized. And we can record it after notarization. Once this contract commences, once we have a move-in and start date, that is the date the tenant is allowed to occupy the property. So that date needs to go ahead and coincide with the notarization date. Now, paragraph 3 is rent. Rent is going to be itemized in these lines below. It's going to have your monthly rent, the day of the month it's due, where the payment is going to be due, when and what the first month's payment is going to be. If there's going to be rent that's prorated, and from what dates to what dates, and payable on when. It also notes utilities. What utilities will the tenant be responsible for? Is the tenant going to be allowed to sublet or occupy with other people? And if so, do they need to be named? Number 6, if a security deposit is going to be collected, it's required that a move-in, move-out addendum is going to be done as well, and that the security deposit is put into a trust account, and that trust account is noted in this paragraph. Now, with the move-in, move-out addendum, that is to ensure that we have the condition of the property when it's being moved into, as well as the condition when they are moving out. So if there's any claim against damage, then there is a proper paper trail and it's been noted. As far as maintenance, the tenant is responsible for maintaining the property, including the yard, and making sure everything is in good condition. And typically, according to the boilerplate language, the tenant is not allowed to make alterations or improvements to the property without the written consent. It does give the option of having the carpets cleaned professionally. So if that's something that you need to do, paragraph 7A needs to be checked. Now, the lessor does have the right to go in and inspect the property or make the alterations or repairs. But keep in mind that there is protections against landlord-tenant, quiet enjoyment, that a specific amount of notice is required. So for a landlord to enter the property, 2 days notice is required. And if they want to show the property, they can show it with a 1 day's notice. But anything that's inside the building has to be 2 days notice. Now, if there is a late rent or a non-sufficient check, then paragraph 9 will itemize what the penalty is for that. If there's a non-refundable fee that's associated with this, it would go in paragraph 10. Leaving these options blank does not default it to anything. So if those are blank, the numbers are 0. If there are pets involved, then the pet addendum has to be used. I'll go ahead and go over what the pet addendum looks like. Renters are required to maintain renter's insurance, and renter's insurance typically does cover a limited portion. So talk to the renter about what type of insurance to best protect against the items that they need to protect against. Now, landlords are required to have working carbon monoxide alarms as well as smoke detectors, and they're required to note all of them in paragraph 14. So this is going to look just like our 65B. So any landlord who has a renter in it and their building needs to actually note if there is a emergency evacuation plan, if there are sprinklers, how the smoke alarms are wired, if they're battery or built in, and they're going to be required to fill out paragraph 14. Now, just as we have our purchase and sale agreement with our agency relationship and compensation noted, line 15 is very similar to our purchase and sale agreement lines 17A and B. So if this is for a rental that's advertised on the Northwest MLS, it'll have the offer amount. You'll have to put the offer amount in the lessor's offer, if any, and the amount that you would like to be paid as agreed per your tenant agent service agreement will go in the next line, the amount to be paid by lessor. You also have the option to credit additional money back to your tenant. And just as we have in every other purchase and sale agreement, and as required by law, we are going to be disclosing the agency relationship that we have. Tenant is represented by whom? Lessor is represented by whom? Attorney fees. This is our general provision that's in all of our boilerplate language. And as far as local ordinances, these extra items are added in the rental agreement because it is the tenant's responsibility to make sure they are complying with local laws, local ordinances, and any local CC&Rs. If there is lead-based paint in the house, or if it is built prior to 1979, we will still be adding the lead-based paint disclosure. And in all of our rental agreements, we need to also be handing over the mold disclosure as well. Now, any any lessor is going to be subject to making sure they follow the rules and not violate fair housing. So they should be informed that they are not allowed to discriminate against any of the protected classes. Once you're finished completing this form, everything below needs to be fully filled out. Fill out the tenant, fill out their employer, fill out your brokerage firm, fill out your name, your brokerage, or you are the broker. Fill out everything possible, because once this is complete, it's going to be sent over to be notarized. So this can be notarized through a local notary. It can be notarized through an escrow company, but in either case, this form is required to be notarized and all signers need to be on there. As the final page, it does kind of lay out the basic rules of being a good renter. Talking about making sure your pipes are not going to freeze, telling the landlord if there are any repairs that need to be done immediately, not using the property for anything illegal, making sure you have permission for your pets to be on the property. So I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but this is the checklist on how to be a good renter. Now, in order to collect the security deposit, a move-in, move-out addendum must be signed. You're going to go ahead and date everything as you would to match up with the rest of your agreement. This is so we can reference it to the rest of the contract. The move-in date is going to be written. Now that's also going to be the date the keys are delivered and any garage remotes. This also will note the move-out date and the date the keys and remotes were handed back. It will verify that there are, in fact, working smoke alarms, working carbon monoxide alarms, and it will note any damage on the house. Now, there are 9 pages of checklists on what the damage is going in and turning around what the damage is coming out. Fill it out the best you can, and just remember that anything noted on here as being undamaged before but damaged at the end will be subject to that seller claiming it against your security deposit. If there is a pet in this house, the pet addendum is Form 68B. In Form 68B, we're going to reference our first 4 lines as we would the rest of our contract and list out the type of animal, the breed, their name, the color, the weight, everything we know about the animal. If there's an additional pet deposit required, that would go in paragraph 1. And any city ordinances keeping in with the law, basically the law of the land, you'll go ahead and note the county or the city to make sure that those pets are in fact meeting the requirements of the local jurisdiction. The tenant is going to be liable for any pet damage. And the tenant is going to hold the lesser harmless if anything is done, to keep the pets on the property. Anything other that needs to be written in can be done in line 8. Now, if there needs to be an amendment to this rental agreement, in our purchase and sale agreements, we just reach for our blank Form 34. But we don't have that opportunity because that definitely references a purchase and sale agreement, and this is not that. So the equivalent of a 34 with a rental agreement is Form 68C. It's just going to be a blank addendum where anything that needs to be updated or changed can be added on this. Please note that this is a two-party signed form. This is not a notice. This is an agreement. Now, what happens if we just need to give a notice? Well, 68N is our notice. If you have something that just needs to be delivered as a notice and is not a two-party agreement, 68N is your blank notice for you to go ahead and fill out and deliver. Please remember that if you are working with anybody who is going to be interested in doing a rental, it is ideal that we get them into our property management. You as the agent are not a property manager. And unless they are part of the property management, we are kind of done once that contract hits the signing block. So if you have a client who would benefit from property management services, such as keeping the money in a trust account or doing the maintenance, or any sort of other advice when it comes to being an expert in rentals or in a certain county, please reach for the TMG Property Management. I did put some contact information here. Remember, clients of yours who want to have a rental, list a rental, and have a property management company help them keep that up. This is going to be your go-to spot. I appreciate you listening. I hope I was able to shed some light on some new things for you. Have a great day.